I am Marwan Cameron, and this is The Conduit. All right, y'all. It is 10 a.m. in Kitsap County. It is August 28, 2021. We have a special show for you today, brought to you by the NAACP Mission Outreach Day. This is a historical education panel, and they have 4 speakers today. Okoye Karen Vargas, founder and director of Living Life Leadership. Dr. Karen J. Bolton, school board director of Bremerton School District. Roosevelt Smith, owner of Shar Antiquities, or Antiques. And also Sonia Berry, assistant director of student services at Central Kitsap School District. So that will be coming up shortly. We're just waiting to enter into the room, and we'll go ahead and get going. I hope everyone is doing okay this fine Saturday. I think I don't know if I announced it or not, but I had surgical procedure on my back yesterday, so I am down. But here, this is important. So trying to do my part as always and bring you information that is important. So literally just waiting for the show to start. I should probably pop that back up there. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances will be made for the uses of purposes such as copyright statute, nonprofit, educational, yada, yada, yada. While we are waiting, again, if you need us, you can give us a call at G2 360-373-3000. As you know, we've got a really powerful show coming up this Monday at 6 p.m. So please set your reminder to tune in. It's going to really be an important show this Monday at 6. It really is. It's going to be centered around emergency management, being prepared, what some of our leadership has learned from their experience, and what to do next. All right, so it looks like they let me into the room, so I'm going to go ahead and let us go ahead and get in here.
So for our audience who is joining us, if you can keep your screen off, and when the panel begins to speak, if there's questions that you have, please put those questions in the chat.
All right, let me go ahead and get that on there. Sorry for that bad television there.
We'll
that
silence. To some of them, we may not be able to get to all of them. And I'm going to give it 2 more minutes, and then we'll get started. And welcome to our mission outreach program, our virtual mission outreach program. We did not have it last year because of the pandemic. So this year we wanted to at least bring you our education panel that has been a part of our mission outreach program. And welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for taking the time to be with us here today.
Oh, not at all. My father just really championed this, so I really wanted to be a voice.
Thank you so much.
All right, so they're waiting for a few more people to come into the room. And then this will go ahead and get going. As you can see from the names, you see Carl Jacobson, you see Bremerton, Greg Wheeler.
I will let them in. And so welcome everyone. I'm Tracy Flood, president of the NAACP Unit 1134, covering Bremerton, Kitsap, Mason, and Jefferson counties. And again, welcome to our Mission Outreach Virtual Educational Panel that we have today. I'm going to get us started here. And we're going to start this morning with opening prayer. And we have Jason Robertson with us this morning, and we're honored to have him here. I invited him to do our opening prayer, and he so graciously answered the call. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh, I just wanted to take this time to again say thank you. I appreciate just being invited to this gathering. And then I wanted to say just thank you for being here. Thank you for you. Thank you for everybody championing this cause. It's tremendous. And it's a tremendous undertaking. So like that, gracious and merciful Father, we thank you. Thank you for another day that was not promised to us. Father, we thank you just for your presence. We thank you for the sense of unity. We thank you for us coming together, Lord Jesus, to do something that's outside of ourselves. Father, now I'm asking that you would bless these meetings. And Father, bless the words and bless our hearts, Lord God, that we might be unified for the purpose of change, positive change of that. Father, we don't take for granted that the gifts that we've been given, Lord God, have been given just liberally. We don't take that for granted. So with that in mind, we desire to use these gifts, our own voice, to champion those who can't speak, to champion those, Lord, who are disengaged with our society, Father. Bless us this day, Lord God. Father, grant us, Lord God, the courage and the strength, Lord God, to be successful. Praise and magnify in Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Thank you again for that prayer. And
not at all.
I told Ms. Lucretia that when I first became president, Dr. Robinson, he swore me in. So, from the beginning of me leading this, the oldest civil rights organization, our Bremerton branch, he has a presence. And so I'm honored to have you here and to be able to share our first virtual mission outreach program with you. So thank you again for your time. And we're going to move on to our welcomes in our program. And we will have greetings from our mayor.
Thank you, Tracy. Good morning. Long time no see, Tracy. So good morning, everybody. And thank you for giving me the chance to come in this morning, provide a greeting. And I just want to offer my thanks and encouragement to everybody, the panel, especially for taking time out today, and to all those in attendance who are here to learn and to just make sure that the history is brought back to the surface so we understand the work that's ahead of us and why we're here. And I think it's important to revisit the original mission statements. And we're heading into new times of transformational change in law enforcement. It's a time of revisioning across our country, Bremerton and all the way to Bremerton, which is no different. And we're doing this in the middle of the fifth wave of a deadly pandemic. and all of your leadership and courage is now just on behalf of the city of Bremerton, more appreciated by me than ever before. And so I just, I want to provide that warm welcome as a dues. I will say, as a dues-paying member of the NAACP myself, I do want to provide that warm welcome, and I look forward to hearing the conversations this morning. Thank you.
So we have a video greeting from Congressman Kilmer that I'm going to cue up here, and hope that it goes. Hopefully everyone can see that.
Hey folks, Derek Kilmer here. First, I want to say thank you. Hey folks, Derek Kilmer here. First, I want to say thank you.
If you can please turn off your screens and your sound if you're not a presenter. I will come back to the video. Hopefully we'll be able to get it running. And so we'll go back to our program. And so Carl, if you want to briefly take a couple of minutes and tell our participants the purpose of the Mission Outreach Program.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. My name is Carl Jacobson, Chairman of the Political Action Committee of the Bremerton Branch NAACP. Mission Outreach Day program started about 20 years ago, and it's an annual commemoration of several instances in the history of the modern day church in which the church took part in successful actions to protect the basic human rights of people that were under attack. And usually comes around the time of the anniversary of the Bloody Sunday March in Selma, Alabama, early March, and it commemorates that anniversary and also the anniversary anniversary of the adoption of the Libyan Constitution, the anniversary of the release of Nelson Mandela from prison in South Africa, and the anniversary of the People's Power Revolution in the Philippines. This year, because of the pandemic, they got transplanted in time to the end of August, and this date was picked as a new rescheduled date for the Mission Outreach Day event, because it's the 58th anniversary to the day of the famous speech by the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., in which he spoke of his vision of a future America, which would be free of the scourge of racism. So at this time, it's appropriate to connect those two anniversaries, or all those anniversaries, because Reverend King, in addition to being a vocal advocate for civil rights here in the USA, was also a vocal advocate for international peace. So by connecting this anniversary with the original anniversaries celebrated at the Mission Outreach Day event every year, we can kind of focus on expanding that vision to include a vision of a U.S. foreign policy which has a strong focus on human rights, the protection of human rights, and the promotion of democracy. And closing out this brief statement here, I would remind everybody that today is the day that there are events going on all over the country with a focus on voting rights and trying to protect voting rights here in this country, and those voting rights are under attack. So with that, I'll turn the program back over to Tracy and get on with the rest of the program.
Thank you, Carl, for that highlight of our mission outreach program purpose. And Carl is our political action outreach chair on our state area board, as well as our local NAACP board. And so this brings us to the heart of our program, our history educational panel with Karen Vargas, Roosevelt Smith, Dr. Karen Bolton, and Sonia Berry. Welcome. And we will begin with a brief introduction. Karen Vargas is the founder and director of Living Life Leadership, a youth mentoring program with New Life Community Development Agency here in Kitsap County. Roosevelt Smith is the owner of Shar Antiques and an antique appraiser and retired mental health counselor, collector, and exhibitor of Black Americana, as well as a United States Air Force Vietnam veteran and past commander of NAPDAS. Dr. Karen Bolton is a retired tenured professor from Olympic College and is an elected member of the school board of Bremerton High School, Bremerton School District. She has a doctorate degree in education from Badminton University and an MA in organizational leadership from Chapman University, and a BS degree in workforce education from Southern Illinois. Sonia Berry is an assistant director and of student services with Central Kitsap School District, a contracted with OSPI and CSTP, and she can explain those, as a racial equity specialist and staff development with ABIT for culturally responsive teaching. And I have more bios here for the information that gives you a little bit more information about our upcoming speakers, our panel members. And I want to turn this over to Karen, who again has been a long time community advocate in Kitsap County and done several different works. I forgot to mention, she's the co-chairperson of the Multicultural Advisory Council for Bainbridge Island School District as well. So we'll start with Karen and begin the conversation and presentation Each speaker we allow to speak for 6 to 8 minutes, and then we will be able to ask questions in the chat. Feel free to put your name and contact information in the chat as well, so that we can have that for future invites to our attendees. Thank you. Ms. Karen, go ahead. And we should also say,
good morning, everyone. I just like to thank everyone that's here today. I also would like to thank Mr. Carl Jacobson, who have championed the Mission Outreach Day for the last 20 years. I'd first like to start by acknowledging the land that I'm on. I am at the Mashantucket Pequot Tribal Nation with the United South and Eastern Tribes here in Norwich, Connecticut. And I'd also like to acknowledge the land, the Suquamish tribal lands that our Kitsap County community is now standing on. And so as we begin today, I just would like to begin the conversation and talk about the importance of equity within the educational system. I've worked with the Multicultural Advisory Council for the Bainbridge Island School District for the last 30 years, have been involved with them there on Bainbridge Island, and work within our central Kitsap school districts, our Bremerton school districts, and South Kitsap school districts. One of the most important thing that I think we need to be putting on the table and having a conversation about is what equity looks like in education as we move forward. Here we are in 2021, and we're still dealing with diversity, equity, and inclusion within the educational system. I think that it's important that we begin to, one of the things that I heard our wonderful Mayor Wheeler say is we have the opportunity, it's a brand new day to be able to move these things forward. One of the things that I also want to bring to light is the work that is needed within not just our educational system, but also in our government, our health districts, and within our community. We started work 2 years ago with our E-Race Coalition, which looks at equity, race, and community engagement, and the importance of working in coalition, working collaboratively, working in a unified way to address the disparities that is within our systems. We have been working diligently for over the past 10 years with our Race and Pedagogy Institute with Puget Sound, as well as the Undoing Institutionalized Racism with the People's Institute in Seattle, Washington, which is national. They have different headquarters nationally as well as internationally. As Carl had brought to our attention, we are commemorating the civil rights leader, Martin Luther King, on this day to be able to address. Here we are in 2021, and we are still addressing the inequities and the disparities that lies within our nation, within our community, and within our systems. We want to be able to make transformational change as we move forward, especially in the educational system, because equity must first begin with education. We need to understand the historical importance of why and what and how we got to where we are today, especially when it comes down to equity in education. We understand that this nation, we have a long-standing history of disparities, racism within all of our systems, whether it's our law enforcement, our government, our educational systems. And we, as our community members, we want to begin to not only educate, inform, and empower our community members to begin to make this transformational change, but that we all sit down and begin to have these type of conversations. as we move forward to do this important work, it's vital that we examine how we would move forward to transform what's happening around all of our communities. None of us are exempt. It's going to take all of us to be able to address these disparities. And we have to take a hard look at history and what that looks like, especially when we talk about there's been much conversation about the critical race theory. And as we begin to speak more on the issues that will, I think that we will shed light on some of these, some of the issues that still exist within our communities. I would like to talk about the importance of whole education, telling the truth, true education. And I say true education because we know that our educational system has been colonized from its inception. We need to understand that we have to have whole history and that we're not selective with that truth telling within our educational system. It's not just that we're going to be teaching about diversity and equity and inclusion, but we're going to be talking about the importance of telling the truth in our historical content, and so that we can begin to heal some of the history that has harmed us today. And so when we talk about being inclusive, what does that look like for our educational systems to be inclusive in a way that empowers and it educates and it instructs? We have to look at our curriculum. Curriculum is key, that we are not selective or we are not exclusive with true history, that we are being inclusive with the history. I would also like to say the importance of the contributions that many diverse indigenous people of color have made throughout the nation that must be included within our curriculum, our educational system, so that we would be able to move forward. And so with that being said, I will now hand it back over to Miss Tracy Flood.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in the community and highlighting on those very important points that are so relevant for this time. We next will go to Mr. Roosevelt Smith.
Okay. Good morning. I would like to first start off by saying Benjamin Franklin, which was as we know, one of the starters of our country, or what have you, for 55 years, he felt that, and he talked about the inferiority of African Americans. Okay. One evening, he was invited to a school of ex-slaves. At 56 years old, until he died, he started talking about, wow, wait a minute. Blacks are not inferior. They can learn. Okay. So for 55 years, this man, founding member of our country, felt that Blacks were inferior. But then he found out at 55 that they weren't. And for the rest of his life, that's the stand that he took. I'm saying that to jump to in 1970, in the Air Force, we had a program called Race Relations. In Race Relations, it was a 5-day course. The first 2 days, and you mainly had whites and blacks, because during Vietnam, there was many race riots, okay, within the military ranks. race relations, like I said, it was a 5-day course. The first 2 days, the whites was on one side and the blacks were on the other side of the room. By the third, fourth, and fifth day, hey, guess what? Those groups got together. They started exchanging telephone numbers, things of this nature. What happened is we talked about our differences. We had that, as they say, that uncomfortable conversation concerning race. Okay. In 1998, I did, for the first time, a sensitivity training at one of the schools over in Seattle. Some of the same questions that I had heard during 1970, I heard those at that time. When I do presentations today, I hear those same questions. And those same questions are based on, it's things that people really have not been able to be educated about, meaning, the ways of African Americans. Okay. So I'm gonna jump to how do we remedy that? Through education, of course. At this time, how many African American teachers do we have in the Roosevelt School District, the CK School District, and the North Kitsap School District? How many African American teachers do we have? Years ago, the Bremerton School Board went out and grabbed teachers from some of the HBCUs. Some of those teachers are retired in Bremerton. It's so important that the African American presence was there in the school system. And that's where I would like to focus a lot of our attention, is getting those African American teachers. But then here's the thing: as we attempt to recruit African American teachers to this area, what do we have for those African American teachers? What type of activities do we have? We would always have to tell them, well, you can go to Seattle, you can go to Tacoma. My thing is, we as a community, we have to embrace the reality that in order to have change, we have to start at the basic, that is through education at the K-12 arena. And that's where I'm at. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roosevelt. And we know in history that education is so key to success and so important, and has been an area that has been challenged throughout history. So thank you for highlighting that. And next we will hear from Dr. Karen Bolton.
Thank you. First of all, appreciate the invite, and thank you, Karen, for the land acknowledgement. I very much appreciate that. So, I want to talk more about this educational piece and teaching history, but I want to fall back more on the educators, because I was in that classroom, and being a college professor and a woman of color, being one of two at Olympic College, it was a tough road. And so, more importantly, being in that system and having an all-white male tenure committee and having to go through the gauntlet with 3 white men with PhDs, and I'm not even part of that system of the club, it was daunting and it was not easy. Years down the road, Washington State, we developed, we had a faculty and staff of color conference where we'd all get together and support each other. And then years later, we developed a mentoring program so we could mentor other faculty of color who are going through the process to support them. And then we expanded that to include administrators of color because we realized that the people moving up in the system, the administrators who are doing policy and things like that, were not up. So we wanted to grow our own. So I talk about the faculty because, and teachers, you have to understand, we can only do with what we got. So if I'm only going to get this book to teach, how am I going to expect the other people who are not people of color to teach something they don't know about, or maybe not even I know about? I very recently, within the last few years, went back to school so I could learn more on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because I came up at a time where I wasn't taught that. I didn't understand it. I'm doing my ancestry. I didn't even realize that my father, for years, wasn't even allowed to vote, and he was born and raised in rural Mississippi. And it's not the fault of the system. And it's not the fault of my parents, but my parents and my ancestors in that time frame, in the 20s and 30s, when they came up, when we got to the 60s, they were not talking about it. They refused to talk about it because you know what they said? That's in the past. And so they were more focused on getting us ready for the future. So there's a disconnect. And so as we try to shift, and let me tell you, within the last 2 years, culturally, the society has changed, and we've understood now we have work to do. We miss opportunities where we can get individuals and get in the room together and have discussions around diversity, equity, inclusion. So when we start talking about education and teaching and understanding, we have to provide educators with the resources. We just can't say, for example, need to hire more people of color to teach. Okay, what does that mean? We have to get together and get in a room together and decide how are we going to do that. We can pluck people up from the HBCU in rural in Alabama, but then you're going to stick them here in Bremerton. What resources do we have for them? And then not only that, who's going to help mentor them? Because they're going to be called upon, like I was. Karen, I need you to sit on the diversity council. Karen, I need you to do that. So that is that with the unseen work, the hidden work that I always had to do. How I always had to go out and help mentor other people of color, see students of color. So there's always that hidden work and hidden things that you have to do on top of living in a society that doesn't look like me at all. So our curriculum is not inclusive. But we have to clear the path and give people time and give the people resources to learn how to make your curriculum more inclusive. So I talk about teaching history is hard. Having the discussions is hard. But we cannot continue to not teach. People don't understand about. I'll go back a second, and I remember having this discussion about how my dad couldn't vote. But more importantly, how I didn't understand why he couldn't vote and what a poll tax was. And people my age were like, I don't understand. So it's not just the children, it's the adults as well. And so I'm hopeful. I know that we're a smart nation. We're in a nation of Google and internet. And like it or not, these kids are very, very smart, and they're getting it. And if anything, that the last election has taught us, there's a movement that is happening. And so it's moving so quick and so fast, we can't, as an adult, I'm having trouble trying to keep up and understand. And so we're going to get there. But like I said before, it's not just a matter of decolonizing everything we do, but we have to decolonize our learning. But that takes a lot when it comes to people, resources, time, and everything. So whatever we can do to help educate everybody across the spectrum, I'm all for. So, yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Bolton. And again, each panelist is building on the conversation around the importance of history, around the importance of diversity in education. And unlike many that are from this area, growing up in Chicago, the conversation wasn't around diversity because my teachers looked like me. There were people in leadership that I could go to, that I had the example. So there wasn't anything as a child that I didn't feel that I could do because my teachers, Black women, looked like me, until when I went to one of the most diverse high schools in Chicago growing up, Lane Tech, up by where the Cubs play, if you're familiar with the Chicago area. Then I was in what is still today one of the top 10 high schools in Illinois. And then going into the Navy. So then it became less diverse. And then the conversations began to get harder and the challenges became more prevalent. And then you could see the stereotypes, the visibility of these things. Being a student at Olympic College, at night, on active duty, at 19 years old, wondering where are the teachers that look like me? So these things are very relevant, even for us. But also knowing that when we drove from Chicago to Tennessee and my dad got a ticket, he got pulled over, he got escorted to the jail to pay the ticket. Couldn't mail the ticket in. So there is a part of lived history that we of a particular generation have outside of Washington State that those that are from this area may not have seen before. But we know that we are not without that history here in Birmingham. We know that those that have come before us, Loxie Egan's, Alice Egan's, that they paved the way for workers' rights and housing issues that were very prevalent here, as well as education and being able to be on the same level. Birmingham being the most diverse school district, challenges that exist there. So this is just the beginning of the work that we know that needs to happen. And with that, but I just wanted to kind of tie that together, that history that is very real. It's one in which we cannot ignore. We cannot ignore the fact that not everybody understands what BIPOC means. We make assumptions. We make assumptions that everyone understands what critical race theory is. People begin to talk about things that they hear but cannot define. We cannot assume that everyone understands that equality and equity are not the same.
Hey, Casey, can I just interject one thing real quick? I just want people to understand critical race theory is a course taught at law school. It is not something that we teach to indoctrinate or anything. It has nothing to do with K through 12 community college. It is a law school thought and theory. So if you just simple Google it, it'll tell you. So I just want to put that out there. It has nothing to do with anything that we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bolton. I was just opening it up so that we could get to the heart of these misconceptions that are put out there in the media, that are put out there on the internet, that are put out there in divisive ways that don't need to be. So, next, our final panelist, Sonia Berry. I think you have the ability to share your screen now.
Yes. Well, thank you. Oh my gosh. I'm just so honored to be part of this panel and not knowing what to expect. I think I just wanted to challenge the way I learned American history as an Indigenous woman. I am, my maiden name is Lestenkoff. My parents, Michael Lestenkoff Jr. is from the Pribilof Islands in Alaska, and my mom is from Helsinki. And I did not learn about my history, and I am now learning about it and challenging it to empower myself and the stories that I learned. I just want to talk a little bit about things like this, the doctrine of discovery, which, as we know, is the intent of colonialism for our explorers that came to the Americas in the name of the sovereignty and their pride to claim the vacant lands and framed our indigenous ancestors as inhuman and have this presupposition that there was no one there and that our indigenous ancestors were barely clothed and ignorant and not human. And this is in the imagery of our history, like the seal of Massachusetts in 1642, where this was the stories that were perpetuated about indigenous people and the contact. But what I want to challenge it with is that there was not vacant land, there were complex trade routes, governments, agricultural systems. If we look at the Native American trade routes in 1491, they look very similar to their interstate highways because they are based upon that. And even misconceptions around foods, animals, non-edible plants, medicines, and our government systems. If we think about our Constitution, was really borrowed upon the government system of the Iroquois there and Native people. And these were things that were never taught to me and increased my internalized oppression. I remember being in 5th grade, realizing that when they were doing our state history class and it talked about the Native people in past tense, they lived in wigwams. And I was like, wait, I think they're talking about us. Why are we all dead? It was very confusing and conflicting to the messages I received at home about my parents and our experiences as Alaska Natives. I discovered my voice recently in being an anti-racist educator in my 15 years in education, 25 years in education. And I think about how our historical contexts equal our current realities, and we have to know our history in order to challenge our current realities. And you can see how our food policy program and practicing and teaching of who gets to tell the story really is the shameful root of discrimination and marginalization of Indigenous people and people of color, depicting and perpetuating stories of savages, barbarians, inferior and uncivilized. Again, this is rooted in manifest destiny and the surge and in slavery as well for free labor and land acquisition, and the forced assimilation of Black and Indigenous communities for centuries. And there is a brief video here, I think 30 seconds, that shows there shouldn't be any sound. But if we look at how quick manifest destiny perpetuated the systems of oppression and land acquisition and genocide of Indigenous people, it's a pretty quick rate. development of the reservation systems. You can see how that was switched. I won't show all of it, but this is the land loss and the millions of indigenous people that were murdered through manifest destiny. And then we have Andrew Jackson in the Indian Removal Act, again, which is the forcible removal. Roadblock progress has led to policies like the Trail of Tears, the 5,000 miles, the fleeting and the combining of tribes, the decimation of tribes, the extinction of many tribes. And then my grandparents spoke 4 languages. They were removed from the mainland of Alaska on the Pribilofs they were slaves to the fur trade by the Russians. So they spoke Unamun or Aleut. They spoke Russian because of the fur trade, and then they spoke Slavic because of the Russian Orthodox missionaries, and then they spoke English because of the Americans arrived, and my grandparents were forbidden to go to school. And when Hawaii was bombed, Pearl Harbor, the Aleutian Islands were also bombed, and the Aleut people were forcibly. My dad was born in an internment camp in Alaska, and my parents were not U.S. citizens, and in order to establish citizenry, had to go to boarding schools. And the federal policy and practice around this was to kill the Indian and save the man. And through this, I speak English and Spanish, so it was a pretty brutal and effective system. Things like blood quantum, only animal, horses, dogs, and Indians have blood quantum, and I have a certificate in blood that says I'm full force or 100%. Even though I have fairer skin, the policies through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, much like African Americans, was to choose the race based upon the mother's race, because paternity wasn't always accepted, particularly if the biological father was non-Native or not Black. And the Indian Child Welfare Act, up until 1978, Indigenous children were stolen from their parents and put in foster care and adoption. Today, Native children are 4 times more likely to be in the foster care system, which is a current reality based upon our history. And why is this all important? When the first ACE study came out, it was 80% white participants, and they in 2015 amended this when they thought about racialized trauma, and they extended the hypothesis to consider race and social conditions in local context. In the United States, we have a local context of slavery and genocide of indigenous people. And then this is the embodiment, and it's in our epigenetics, it's in our DNA, and it's local. In Washington, we have 29 federally recognized tribes. When I went to the Title I conference in Atlanta, it was the heart of the Civil War, civil rights, and had a different local context. Things can be amplified through our microaggressions and implicit bias. But what we need to do is to interrupt policies, programs, and practices in our current reality here in Washington State. Think about the impact on this and our current reality. I know this data is a little dated, but hasn't changed a whole lot since 2016. And so why people say, why don't they just get over it? Why don't they just pull themselves up by the bootstraps? It's layered, it's complex, and it's our current reality. And so we need to move to a shared history approach to include student voice, to hire staff that look like our students and represent our families, and talk about how we have experienced as history in different ways, depending on where we stood on the color line, and knowing that there are many allies in the work, and I know I might have gone over my time, but I have a lot to say on this, and I'm saying I am an anti-racist educator. I think I just kept it under 8 minutes if I could, but out of 10, sorry, my bad.
I will give you some time from the other that didn't quite get their 8 minutes in. So you're totally fine. I appreciate the presentation. And I'm quite sure that everyone in attendance has appreciated the history that you've brought on Native American history and the powerfulness of the timeline showing in that video. Very powerful. Karen, did you have your
Yeah. Sonia, I just wanted to thank you so much for that presentation, but I also wanted to talk to you because you said something that was very key. That was shared histories. We come from a stolen people that was brought to a stolen land, and we have walked through many of the same experiences as well as atrocities with being oppressed and all of the negative history. You were deemed savages. We were deemed beasts, and the languages that was used back in the 17 and 1800s with cotton matters and the implementation of supremacy within the school districts and with the erasing of indigenous as well as people of color in their history within the educational systems began back in the 17 and 1800s with all of our school systems. We have not yet challenged or addressed those systemic issues of the construct of racism and the construct of the educational systems that continue to oppress. When you see the erasure of the historical content from our educational systems as a whole has kept us in this place of bondage, kept us in a place of oppression, and has erased it. And it has really been the cause of continued perpetuation of these oppressed systems. And I believe that if we begin to address our educational system, then we can begin to transform and move us to a place of health and well-being, as well as historical reconciliation when it comes down to the racial divides and how racism was a construct and continues to be a construct. I think that your presentation was outstanding. I would love to meet with you afterwards to do the combined. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And I think Dr. Bolton, did you have your?
Sonia, really thoroughly enjoyed your presentation, so thank you for that. And it was some things that I didn't even know. And once again, I'm a lifelong learner. And so learning it and educating myself helps me even more so. But, and I see questions coming up here that, I'm really going to push this, is that we need more people sitting at the table when we're having these discussions. There's no secret. There's only 2 people of color. I'm one in the Birmingham School Board, and Drayton Jackson is the other one in Central Kitsap School Board. That's not enough. School board, city council, you want to know how things get changed? They change at the local level. And if you want to go state level, then do it. And so there's avenues of things, resources that we can help you. It's a thankless job, but I'm an educator at heart, and I love being in a ground floor having these discussions. And the other thing is teaching hard history and what we know about history and what we don't know hurts us all. right? But in order for us to grow, we have to have these conversations. But then I go back to exactly what I said earlier. We have to help individuals be prepared to have those discussions, because you're going to get pushback. And I've taught a diversity class at the college level, and it was messy, where students thought we could play all the way up to the president of the college, vice president, and my dean, and I got ran through the gauntlet. But you know, I persevered only because I had a mentor and I had someone to help me, had my back as I stood in the fight. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Bolton. And that's important. It's important to be able to have support, and especially when we're crossing into territory that we know, in essence, throughout history, our textbooks have been whitewashed. We're in an era where the question in the chat was how many people, leaders basically, have seen this presentation. Today, Sonia, have you presented to anyone in the community?
Made this, I just put this together yesterday.
And that's why I said today.
In terms of what I thought might be appropriate in challenging this. I do get to contract with OSPI, with the Beginning Educator Program, and we are working to dismantle policies, programs, and practices with new educators that have harmful impacts to students, particularly students of color, and working now nationally with AVID, which is a great program. I know Bremerton has it as a staff development for culturally responsive teaching. And in Central Kitsap School District, I'm honored to lead our newly formed district equity team, as well as the building team. And I am just coming into my voice a little later, but better late than never. And I think the part that relieved me, as painful as it was, is like, oh, this is a framework. Oh, this is a classic case of systemic racism where I didn't have to internalize it in thinking that I was seeing things alone, or that there weren't others who didn't experience things the way I did. And I know I have a lot of privilege, that I think about how my grandparents were not allowed to attend school, and here I am, at the central office. I'm just going to use within my circle of influence what I can to, interrupt practices that are harmful to our students.
Thank you, Sonia. And as I said today, and I made that assumption because we spoke and you said you were putting together the PowerPoint, so I kind of knew the answer to that.
I started on Tuesday.
Yeah. So,
you're welcome to it.
But what I will say is the importance of today's panel. We have begun to share it with our leadership. Our mayor was here. He got to hear the panel presentation. And we now have a tool that's readily accessible that Sonia has put together for us to be able to use. But even more so, what today's information has highlighted is the importance of the NAACP's work on a policy level, from basically the classroom to the boardroom. We see the needs that still exist in the educational field. The work that began in 1909 in race riots, over the last 14, 15 months, we've seen the importance of getting out, the young people having their voice, expressing themselves in an organized manner. But we've also seen and been shown that relevance, because many people will go in and say, okay, there's no need. We had President Obama, why do we need this thing? We see exactly what's happened since the presidency and even prior to that, and over time, what's happened. We know that making policy changes in education, healthcare, criminal justice, climate change, voting rights, workers' rights, what we've done as the NAACP is still important, and especially housing issues. being able to advocate for yourselves. The use of words is so important. We highlighted that with critical race theory, understanding the meaning there and how words are used to manipulate people. W.E.B. Du Bois is one of our founders. In the Crisis magazine, how we, and I'll go, but yes, I see you to Bolton, how we use our messaging and how we use the tools that we have to get educational tools to our communities is so important. Dr. Bolton.
I think my fellow panelists, Mr. Roosevelt Smith, had something.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead, Roosevelt.
Going back just a little, I am a true believer in not having to reinvent the wheel. Okay. What I mean is, in this TK district, you have JD Sweet. When you talk about the teaching of equity, one can begin with him because his experiences and his curriculum is mind-boggling. And I was hoping like everything that JD would have participated in this forum. Okay, I have to admit I did not notify him, but I wish that I would have.
I think that Carl reached out to him and he wasn't available, but I'm not sure.
Available. Okay, no problem.
I'll be quoted on that, but I do know that Carl reached out to all of our panel speakers.
Yes, and one of the things that I would say going forward, that, you know, the community people that are listening to this panel discussion, if you in your workforce or within your work community, if you need diversity training or equity training, start with JD, because JD does have a company that would provide those services. Okay, and I think that like I said, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel when it's already there. Okay. Thank you.
Dr. Bolton, did you want to add anything?
I was just acknowledging Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you, because I didn't want to miss you, and I didn't mean to miss you either, Roosevelt.
Okay, no problem.
I got a little tickle here, so excuse me. I looked at I want to make sure that I had a chance to, there were lots of comments in the chat. I think a few questions were answered along the way, but I don't think that I missed any questions. And if I
did see one from Marwan about if we had ever been to the African American local and national history museums. And so I'll tell you that my tenure through, I went to college and we started back up the Black Student Union. And so one of the students came to me and asked me to be, because they have to have a faculty member sponsor the group. And so I took students to the African American Museum. We rode the Seattle ferry, we walked, took the bus, took them to a traditional Southern breakfast where they ate grits for some for the first time. And we went to the museum, and it was an experience for me as well. I've also taken students on a social justice civil rights trip to Ireland. And a lot of people don't really see the connection between social justice and civil rights in Ireland. Well, I'm here to tell you that it is real and there's a connection. There's a poem where the bombing was for a church in Alabama that was from Yeats. And so, and when we visited Yeats country, we read that poem. And there's a direct connection between their social justice and civil rights movement as it was in the United States. But here's the difference. The Irish people are very rich in their history, and they teach that history. As messy and as it is, they are full on. There's not a child in that country that doesn't understand what Bloody Sunday was to them. A child that does not understand to this day the injustices done to that movement in Northern Ireland by the British. I mean, and so they don't shy away from that. And they're still, and I remember distinctly with the gentleman holding, we're and I was having a conversation about civil rights in the United States, and he said, "You're a young country, you'll figure it out." And so that makes sense to me. I mean, we are a young country, so a lot of times, we do have angst because we want it now, but look how much change we've had from Brown versus the Board of Education to where now we're talking about how can we change in the curriculum taught. And I'm going to tell you, as a college professor, I will adapt any book I need. And so if you want to write a book, you can get it published and you can talk to a college professor and only adapt that book into the curriculum that they use. It's just that simple sometimes. Go ahead, Ms. Vargas, I see your hand up.
Thank you.
No, I thank
Dr.
everybody
Garrett.
for this conversation because the conversation is rich. One of the things that I would say is it is vital and important that we immerse our students to be able to go to Washington, D.C., immerse them. We've gone on the civil rights pilgrimage to all of the southern regions. We've taken our students back to Ghana for the 400-year return of enslaved Africans to the Americas. We've looked at all of the slave trails. We've looked at even our indigenous communities and their annihilation of their communities and their erasure. So we have a lot of work to do as far as equity within our school system in Kitsap County. But we also have to understand we sit in a very, and I'll say prominent, and I'll say supremacist county in Washington State. We need to know that history as well. We need to understand when we talk about history, it's not just our history. It's not just our Native history. It's not just our African American. It is also our immigrant. It's also our shipyard. It is also supremacist culture in communities that have existed back to the 1800s. So if we're going to talk about our history in a way, we have to tell the whole history and not be selective as we journey and do this research and begin to move equity forward in the educational system. And we do have to work together. We're doing a lot of work with our People's Institute that have been right there in our state of Washington for over 40 years, undoing institutionalized racism. And so they give us the analyses, they give us the history, they give us all the information and education that we need. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. I'm so glad that Roosevelt spoke about J.D. Sweet, who has been doing this work as well in our school system for over 40 years, have not been acknowledged for any of the equity work that he has done and have laid a solid foundation for us to make some transformational changes to our policies, our procedures, our curriculum. So yes, how do we support the work and support those that have been laboring to get this work done within our community and our county for over the last 40 to 50 years? We have to understand that. And you're right, Tracy, it did start with those founders that came here in the late 1800s and they transformed that shipyard. You know, our footprints and history is very deep in our county, but that has been erased as well. So we have to understand what time it is and how do we reclaim it? How do we lift up those voices? How do we begin to interrupt the narrative that has been perpetuated all these years?
Thank you, Karen.
If you go to the African American Museum in Seattle, you'll see that connection. They do have a significant picture in the history of Bremerton, and so I was very intrigued by that and happy to see that. So that was really cool.
And they have the Tuskegee Airmen highlighted with the information, yes. And so there's a lot of history and a lot of.
Can I add this too, Tracy? We have all that significant. We worked with NAM to give them our history years ago. but our history is here in Kitsap County, and it's not even supported here in Kitsap County with the Living Arts Cultural Heritage Center, with Roosevelt exhibit. Combined, we have our history all the way back to the 1700s, and that has not even been inclusive or supported in our historical societies in Kitsap County. So we've got a lot of work to do. We shouldn't have to go all the way to Seattle to see our own history, because we've had it here. Diane Robinson worked for over 40 years to be able to make sure that history was preserved, that it was not lost or erased. And so how are we supporting our own efforts here in our own county? And that's important, because we try to reach out to our Olympic College to help us to develop and cultivate that preservation program. We see these are the things that I think we have to continue, because that's a pushback when they say, no, we don't want your history. No, we don't want that. And we want it. We want to be able to work with our indigenous, if our colleges and our educational system do not want to preserve this history, we'll work with our Suquamish tribal member in our indigenous communities, because they know the importance of preserving history, culture, heritage. And so I want to put that out there, because we keep on talking about how we're going to get to the next level and do this transformational. And it starts with us being able to educate, inform, and preserve the history that is here in our own county.
So what I do want to say is there are significant ties to King County, Kitsap County, Pierce County. So in no way do we want to say we don't want to have to travel to Seattle. We are directly tied together in history. And back when things were just being established, with the Navy moving in, with more migration into the Northwest, into Kitsap County, relying on the relationships for the first Black attorneys in the Seattle area was very significant in the history and building and making changes in Kitsap County. So the history is tied very close together. We do not have, thanks, Karen. We do not have our when I first came here, I was Miss Robinson, who introduced me to the history. Al Colvin introduced me to the history. We know that we had the Martin Luther King Scholarship Fund. There were so many things that were being done by our NAACP founders and historically in making changes. Even Alice Egan's sharing the story of the purchase of their home and how they had to get a white couple, friends to help them purchase their home. So that's not that long ago.
Let me say this, Tracy. Our history was 22,000 deep, migrating to this.
Yes.
They moved to Pierce and they moved to King, but they were here first.
Yes.
Their footprints were here first. That's right, Quincy Jones. Everybody's footprint was here. They might have migrated and moved to Pierce and moved to King, but there were 22,000 back in the early 1900s that migrated here to build that shipyard. And all of that history needs to be preserved as well. We have to understand the contribution. That's why you have a Loxie Egan Boulevard. That's why you have a James and Lillian Walker. They have their own banks and credit unions and everything. Where's all that history? Just erased? And we've got one of our oldest African-American churches that's still there, that's Ebenezer, over 100 years old. And the history of all of those pioneers and all of those that came through Kitsap County, back leading, like I said, from the 17th with logging and everything, all of that history must not be lost. And we don't mind sharing our history with King County or with the Washington State, because we helped them to build that. We helped them to tell that story and to preserve it. But for us not to even have it in our own county is not acceptable. I'm just gonna say it like that.
And
Dr. Bolton?
Correct.
Roosevelt, go ahead.
Dr. Bolton, I'll wait. I can wait.
So, I want to go back to this thing that we keep talking about teaching and changing the curriculum, and so that we can tell these stories. There's a lot of resources that we could do, and a lot of times you have the educator who wants to do it, and then you have the administration that may be hammered or restricted because of the rules or whatnot. You go directly to the faculty or the teachers, and but you need to understand, provide them the resources and the materials to do it. I've tried to partner. I took went on 3 trips. I had, and let me tell you, to take one student to Ireland was $3,000. It included everything except for the flight. And so I got the school to give them each $1,000 scholarship. $2,000. You don't think it's a lot. But for Kitsap County and community college, the money was astronomical. But then I said, let me do a social justice one too. So I tried to do one where we do this, going to Alabama. We end up in D.C., the African American Museum. I had got my brother, who's a retired T-star. He's going to take the whole group out to dinner. I talked to them about the history and things like that. Couldn't get any resources to get it going. Zero. But then, I find out there's other people in the community that could pay for it. But the thing is I'm already out there in the trenches doing the work, knocking the weeds down, but I don't have the support. And that's where I want people to understand is that we can talk about teaching history. We need to do this, we need to do that. But until we have a forum, invite all the teachers, hey, what do you think? And don't tell them, ask them, because they already know. They already know that the book is this is revisionist history. This history book is written by some white gentleman out of Texas, out of California. They already know that. But if you don't give them the resources, teachers are having to buy their own material to be able to teach the content that they already have. And we can't pile this on top of them. So just having a little compassion and understanding, and maybe allow us to come together and figure out how we can get directly to those individuals. Because if you work through the teachers and the teachers work through the unions, they can change policy and push back on the narrative.
Thank you for that, Dr.
And Karen, I want to go to Roosevelt next.
Okay. I'm a member of the Kitsap County Historical Museum Board. And piggybacking off of what Karen was saying, the history of Kitsap County history, Kitsap County history could remain here in Kitsap County. It did loan items to the Northwest Museum. The current curator at the Kitsap County Museum desires our history. She wants to play a part in preserving it. They have the facilities, they have the board, they have the money that they could maintain those pieces. And I think that it's very, very important that we start working with them. And I think Karen have already started that conversation with the Kitsap County Museum Society curator.
Thank you, Roosevelt. So I do want to highlight that the Northwest African American Museum, and I brought up W.E.B. Du Bois being a founding member of the NAACP. They are having a program tomorrow at 3:00, and the descendant of W.E.B. Du Bois will be featured. I believe great grandson. I'm mistaken, but that's a program that they are holding virtually tomorrow. So if anyone is available to attend that, I think it would be a great program, continuing to talk about education, continuing to talk about the history, building on what we actually have begun today here in our area. And also if the links and information for registration is up on our NAACP Facebook page, if you're interested in that. Also, for these last few minutes, I do want to share the video from Congressman Kilmer, who was talking about voting rights, which is very important to education and a part of this conversation. So I'm going to try this again. If you want to bear with me. I think I worked out the keys here. And
Hey folks, Derek Kilmer here. First, I want to say thank you to Tracy for inviting me to join you. She asked me to share a few updates specifically about voting rights and DC and Puerto Rican statehood. I appreciate the invitation. I appreciate the NAACP, and I appreciate the timing. This was a big week. Just this week, the House passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which is a bill to safeguard voting rights by really putting the teeth back into the Voting Rights Act and ensuring equal access to the ballot box for every American. As many of you likely know, a few years back in its Shelby County versus Holder decision, the Supreme Court really gutted the Voting Rights Act. And in the years since, unfortunately, we've seen efforts across the country to limit access to voting. In fact, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, more than 385 new laws have been proposed in 48 states to limit mail-in voting, early in-person voting, election day voting, and sadly, 18 states have actually passed more than 30 new laws that suppress voting rights. I guess the good news is Washington State's actually been a leader on voting access. We have universal vote by mail. Our state has expanded drop box locations, not shrunk them. Recently, our state legislature restored voting rights for people convicted of a felony who've served their time. But unfortunately, elsewhere, we haven't seen that type of progress. Even in the midst of a global pandemic, you saw some Republican leaders in some states balk at expanding vote by mail and spouting unfounded conspiracy theories that doing so would lead to wide-scale fraud. Obviously, they missed the memo and the reassurances by our state's Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, a Republican, who pointed out that our system has seen a very low incidence of any kind of fraud, if any. Elsewhere, you've seen jurisdictions with histories of discrimination creating new barriers to voting, closing polling places, removing ballot drop boxes, purging voters from voting rolls, and shortening early voting periods. In fact, this week, as Congress took up legislation to defend voting rights, I actually heard some of my colleagues across the aisle suggest that proposals in states like Georgia and Florida and Texas were somehow good ideas. But these proposals are bad. They're bad for BIPOC communities and for voters of color. And in my view, they fail what I call the my grandma test. Now, my grandma became an American citizen at the age of 87. She lived to nearly 109. So for 22 years, she was one of the proudest Americans I knew. She was an active participant in our democracy, and she was a voter. But let's think about some of these proposals that we're seeing in some states. So take voter ID laws that require a photo ID. At in her 90s, my grandma didn't have a passport or a driver's license. She never drove. A photo ID law would have required her to purchase an ID card from the state. And in our state, that costs $54. That's a poll tax. It would require a voter to pay to participate in our democracy, and that fails the my grandma test. We've seen proposals in Georgia and Texas to limit polling places and to end early voting and to prohibit those in line from even being given water or snacks while they wait for hours in line. That wouldn't work for my grandma, and it certainly doesn't work for BIPOC communities here in our country. It is voter suppression, and we should fight back against it. So, we need the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to protect our democracy, to protect our republic. And that's why I'm a sponsor of the bill. That's why I voted in favor of it. And it's why I'll keep working to get it passed. Now, Tracy asked me also to provide an update on the effort for statehood. I strongly support the admission of the District of Columbia as a state. DC represents a vibrant and diverse community and is home to more than 700,000 residents, which is a higher population than Wyoming or Vermont, as well as more than 31,000 military veterans who've served our country honorably. And yet, DC's residents pay the highest federal taxes per capita of any jurisdiction in the country, despite not having full representation in either the House or the Senate. In my view, all citizens, including DC residents, deserve to have their voices heard in Congress. And that's why I'm an original co-sponsor of the Washington, D.C. Admission Act, which would establish statehood for the District of Columbia. It's not an accident that it's H.R. 51, making D.C. the 51st state. And I was proud to vote for the bill's passage in the House, and I'm going to continue to fight to get it passed into law. For that matter, I think that folks in Puerto Rico should have a say in their future too. Whether that be becoming a state or remaining a territory or an independent nation, the people of Puerto Rico should have the opportunity to weigh in. And so I'm a sponsor of a bill called the Puerto Rico Statehood Admission Act. That's legislation that would establish a process for the admission of Puerto Rico into the Union as a state on equal footing with all other states, based on a majority vote of the people of Puerto Rico. If that's what they decide, they should become a state. So let me end on this note. Prior to his passing, I had the honor of joining my late colleague John Lewis in Selma, Alabama for a civil rights pilgrimage. It was probably the greatest honor I've had in this job. I got to walk with him across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, where in 1965 he was beaten and tear gassed along with other civil rights activists as they advocated for an essential American right, the right to vote. Today, over 56 years later, the march for the right to vote isn't done. And that's why I am so grateful to each of you, to the NAACP, for its leadership and for its partnership. Thank you for all that you do to stand up for liberty and justice for all. And thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share these updates with you today. I'm sorry to be missing this event in person, but I really appreciate all that you do. So thank you, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, so thank you. It is now 11:32. I will give the opportunity for any closing comments. Roosevelt, are you trying to unmute? Let's see. There you go. Okay. I'm sending it to you just to click.
Okay. Okay. What I would like to do, I would like to invite each of the panelists to attend my exhibit at the Kitsap County Historical Museum. The name of it is The State of the Union in Black and White. It's a collection of Black Americana from slavery up until the 80s, 90s, even 2000s, okay? And it covers various aspects of our history. And also it covers Kitsap County history. And one of the points I really like to stamp on is that the pieces that you would see are real. You can actually see history in your hands, okay? So I would like to invite you guys to come in, give me a day notice. Because of the COVID restrictions, I would like to do 5 people at a time, okay? We'll open Thursday, Friday, Saturday from 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock. On first Fridays, we are open until 7 or 8 o'clock. Okay. But I'd love to have some of you to come in and travel this world of Black Americana and learning about how images are so effective in reinforcing stereotypes. And also I would have a test for you. A test based on a Louisiana voting test. And if you pass it, I will give you $100. But remember now, I'm the registrar. I'm the one that's going to give the test. Okay? Thank you.
Can you give the address of the historical museum?
It's next to the Roxy Theater.
Okay.
Next to the Roxy Theater.
Okay. On 4th Street.
On 4th Street.
Okay. All right.
Please. And like I say, just give me a day notice and I will be there.
All righty. Okay. Thank you, Roosevelt. And in 1 minute, Karen, can you go in 1 minute?
Yes,
I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're at 11:34.
All right, I'd like to invite everybody out for our 9/11 program at the Evergreen Park on 9/11, starting at 9 o'clock in the morning, and on September the 11th. Come and join us. We're doing our emergency preparedness, and we also want to invite you to participate in our podcast, talking about the need for emergency preparedness with the Conduit. And we'd also like to invite you to the Kids at E-Race Coalition. You can go online and get that.
Thank you, Karen. And I know that there's a lot of other programs coming up, so we'll be sharing that information on our Facebook page and our meetings and through our e-blast. So if you're not on our email list, make sure you include your the request at NAACP@yahoo.com. We can add you. And thank you again for participating today in our mission outreach program, our educational program, our first virtual program. Thank you all for your time and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, y'all. So that was the NAACP's Missing Outreach Day. And you heard from Okoye, Karen Vargas. Shout out to her, letting everyone know to not forget about the podcast on Monday, and also the 9/11 event down at Evergreen State Park. A lot of work is going into that. And some of the leaders that make those decisions again will be actually on the podcast Monday. So, definitely tune in there. And then, shout out to Dr. Karen Bolton for all the work that she has done. We actually were teaching at the same time at Olympic College. So I remember her coming into my classroom and recruiting folks to go to Ireland. And she did a lot of work uh, to find unique ways to partner with different faculty and really gain momentum and support for that program. So she did a lot of work. And so what I did to try to support her in that work was any of my business students, right? Because I taught international business negotiations, sales, things like that. So for my international business students, if they went on that trip, then we would center some of that learning around that to try to support. And so those are those unique ways that she was speaking about that you could take advantage of trying to teach diversity and culture and history. And whatnot. And it does take, some courage, but it takes the desire, right? The desire to do and want to learn more, and want to be better, right? I'm an instructor, or have been an instructor. I hate just using the basic materials. I've sat in a number of classes and trainings, and they can bore you to death. So any way that you can pull in other items, other resources to engage, get people to have their interest, is important and powerful. So it really stimulates the learning, right? And opens up people's eyes. I was just mentioning with someone, I think it was Okoye, in our 5-hour dialogue last Sunday, um, about how some of my folks had never left Kitsap County. Some of my folks had never really ventured outside of Seattle. So now you're talking about going to, another state, Alabama, as they were talking about before, or DC, the nation's capital, let alone trying to go outside the country. Many students have never had that experience at all. And so when you have that myopic viewpoint, right, of the world, your world is only what you know. Your world is just that circle. Maybe you see some pictures. I was talking about how many of my students thought, Africa was just huts and, um, animals that you would see in the zoo here in the States, and had no idea that there's cities and freeways and, everything else, high speed internet. uh, and any African city looks just like a United States city. So they didn't know that. And unfortunately, it really stunts your growth. And for many folks, what happens is what they know, their world reality, when it's this small and this is all they know, they can't think past that, right? This is who I am. This is what I do. These are my options. This is how the people around me operate. That's why I tell you to increase your circle of influence and your circle of support. If the people that are in your immediate vicinity just do these little simple, myopic, very narrow thinking, very narrow things, have no expansion of thought, diversity of experience, and I don't mean diversity so much in race and just culture and experiences, ideas, then all you can think is, this is what I am. This is what it is. I go to school. I have some kids. My kids go to school. I do my best to raise them, and they get jobs, and maybe they have families, and you know, that's it. What can you be? Who can you be? It becomes very difficult to even dream of being everything else, being more, wanting more. Why even dream? What's the point? Never going to achieve it anyway. It's too hard. Day in and day out. So it's so much easier to just give up, give in. It is what it is. I can't be like this person. I can't be like that person. Their situation was different. It kills me to hear that from folks, to feel so defeated and deflated, to feel so hopeless, or to have their hope so limited compared to, you get a goldfish at the pet store and they give it to you in a little plastic baggie of water. That's their world. That's their viewpoint. Maybe if they're lucky, they get into a fish tank. Maybe a 5-gallon or a 10-gallon fish tank. Maybe there's some toys in there they can swim around. So they make it to Belfair. Maybe they make it to Port Angeles. Maybe they make it to Tacoma or Seattle from time to time. Maybe they're even lucky to take a trip out of state every now and then. But no matter where they go, they're still around the same people, the same attitudes, the same thoughts. This is how everyone lives at this level. This is what they can achieve if they're lucky. Otherwise, they get caught in the trap. A lot of folks call it Kidnap County here. This is what it is. It's Kidnap County. Your mind has been kidnapped. Your mind has been trapped. There's lakes, rivers, streams, so much bigger than that Ziploc baggie. I know it's scary, but there's a whole world of opportunity, wonder, love, experience. We don't even need to get to seas and oceans. But how can the goldfish in the Ziploc baggie even think of an ocean? To think of all the other sea life that exists out there. Shout out to Sonia Berry. Good information there. And of course, Roosevelt Smith. As you know, if you have not checked out that podcast with Roosevelt Smith, remember that he was the first exhibit or the first podcast that I did on location. So go ahead, go through the videos there. You can type his name up or Africana. And I went through, spent more than an hour looking at those exhibits. So they're there for you if you can't physically make it down there. But I'm telling you something, you're missing a treat. And then I had Roosevelt Smith on the Conduit in another podcast. Really, two powerful podcasts. So right now, if you're listening to this and you're like, you know what? I'm motivated. I'm interested. I didn't know that this history was right here in Kitsap County. And you see, these folks have all these varied experiences, right? Alabama, DC. Dr. Bolton's taking folks to Ireland. 4th Street, downtown Bremerton. Mr. Smith is tremendously knowledgeable. One of the things I typed in the chat and it said, charity starts at home. We've got to support the folks here first. I love that Mr. Roosevelt shouted out DJ Sweet or JD Sweet. We need more of that. Folks shouldn't have to toot their own horns. If folks are doing the work here locally, acknowledge the folks that are doing here locally. One of the things that really frustrates me about us as a people and the dominant society, both on the right and the left side of the aisle, is they keep going back to Martin Luther King. Quite frankly, I'm kind of sick and damn tired of it. It's like there's been no thought leader since Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King, that's it. It's offensive. That is offensive. Especially when you have 3 people on here that are current, contemporary folks that are doing the work. To me, in our community, as far as Dr. King is concerned, he died in vain for a lot of us. He didn't do what he did and then be assassinated in government sanctioned murder just for us to go back, what, 50, 60 years now. Oh, Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King, Martin Luther the King, Dr. King, Martin Luther King. Frederick Douglass. Edmund Pettit Bridge. So very frustrating. And like I said, very offensive. Okoye, Mr. Smith have a tremendous rich history. And I love talking with them because I learn something new every time I do. And so my responsibility now with hosting a podcast like The Conduit is to bring that information and share it out to you. I can't hold on to the knowledge. That's one of the things that kind of get me about the different meetings that take place in the community. And I've talked about those before, right? You have all these different meetings that take place, and sometimes it's the same faces, sometimes it's different faces. And then we're supposed to get the information and then share it back out into our circles. But there's nothing like firsthand information. And if we know that there's issues, kind of as Derek Kilmer was saying with accessibility and what they're doing with voting rights, we can extend that to other things too, right? And we could be complicit in our own stagnation. So if we don't share this information out to the masses, then how do we ever expect people to learn, to know, to experience, to grow, to share, to teach their children, right? We're the first teachers of our children. First us. They don't go to school right off the bat. We set the tone. We decide what direction in which they will go. For those of you that believe in the Bible, Your Bible talks about that, right? That is a parent's duty to teach a kid, to raise a child in the way, correct? So if you don't know the information, how are you going to teach the information? And you can see the current fight in the school districts with the parents and teachers and everyone else that don't want to teach the actual history. And as I argued before, when they feel like that, do you really want them teaching the history anyway, since they're not going to teach it? They don't want to teach it? It is up to us. But if we don't know as parents, if we don't share it with our children, that becomes our fault. Charity starts at home. We have some accountability too. Things have been done to us, for sure, from the beginning, and continue to happen. But what are we doing about it? How are you teaching your child something different? The actual truth, the real history. What are you exposing them to? We get so caught up in what's a right. And every generation from the next generation wants to have their children have a better life than they had, right? And we're to a point now where that's not true anymore. You become a homeowner. Maybe you leave your home to your children. Your children are able to buy a home. They do better. Your children's children do better. Many of us don't have that experience. We're doing worse. And society has told us, well, you know what? You get to do what you want, how you want, when you want. It's your right. Smoke the weed, listen to the hip hop. And we're being intellectually honest, so I'm not saying all hip hop is bad. But you know what I'm talking about. When our kids can recite the words to WAP, but are struggling with reading, writing, math, talking. And you can blame it on the schools. The school has your kids for 6 hours. What happens the other 18? Are you raising your kids or are you just babysitting your kids? If the school district, when you let your kids go off to school and they're in some spaces where you're like, yeah, I know they don't care about our kids. We know that the school to prison pipeline is a real thing. And they're going to put my child in detention or suspend them. What are you going to do different? Because doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, that's the definition of insanity, correct? We want our kids to be safe. We want them to be children. They shouldn't have to grow up too fast. I know I want that for Layla. I want her to smile and play and not have to worry about scary world life events. But I also have to make sure that she is prepared as she grows into a teenager, she grows into an adult. Because when that happens, society's got a hold of them. So what are they going to value? Are they going to value the club, turn up? Who can I get with? Getting flossy, getting drip, whatever the kids are saying now. Is that the mentality? They're our future. But we have to take the future out of the hands of others and put it back into the hands of us. There was a time, and I know that there are still Black churches that do so, that teach the kids, that help the single parents and two-parent households have a safe space for their kids to learn, to grow, to get information, to gain knowledge, to see people that look like them, that are in different positions. I think a few of the panelists spoke about that, growing up in schools and not having that experience of being taught by people that look like them. The church did a really great job of doing that. Did a really good job of doing that. And I think a lot of the churches have gotten away from it. But to that end, it doesn't just need to be a church. We can do it also. Families can do it also. Leverage your skills, your knowledge, and your abilities. Your KSAs, as they say. I can cook. You can teach. You have a vehicle. I can repair things. And work together in your smaller communities to make sure that you're self-sufficient as a community. That you have an interdependence, not a codependence. Just talking about that the other day. The difference between independence, codependence, independence, interdependence. What's the difference? A lot of people think that, being independent or being self-sufficient means I can do it by myself and I don't have to ever ask for help. I don't need anybody. Nobody doesn't need anybody. It's not how it works. And understand, it doesn't have to be a 50-50 split. It may be 80-20 in some things, right? There may be things that you do that other person cannot do, and what they can do for you may not be on the same scale, but it is it's a contribution. It's meaningful to them. And as you continue to experience and learn and grow, you'll see the percentage decrease because you can do more. But most of us never ever really cast off our mentors. Many of us will have our mentors for a lifetime. And no matter how much we excel, no matter how good we do, we always call back to that person that we know is going to give it to us straight and real. They're not going to sugarcoat it. They're not going to tell us what we want to hear. Because we have a lot of folks in the world that'll tell us just that. They'll tell you exactly what you want to hear. They'll sugarcoat it for you. They'll make it real nice and easy. And oftentimes what happens is we absorb that information and it's like, yeah. You know what? You're right. I don't have to keep my foot on the gas. I can take the foot off. Let me go ahead and put on cruise control. And then you start losing You start losing. And then when you try to put your foot on the gas again, it's harder to get going than it was last time because I'm a little older. I'm more tired. It's interesting when my dad was still with us, he would talk with his mentors, the ones that were still living. I was just telling someone about Aura Franklin. Shout out to those of you that had Aura Franklin as a principal. In the third grade, she had a paddle with holes in it with whistle. Skinny black woman. She would swing that paddle, that thing would whistle, pow, tear you up, boy. And she was the principal of my school when I was in the third grade. But that was my dad's mentor. There's times I'm at home and he's talking on the phone with her. And of course, as kids, you hate that, right? Like, why are you always snitching on me, Dad? But he would talk with her well beyond me being in the third grade. He's a principal now himself. He's at the same level that she is. And he's still calling on her. There's so much that I want to share. And I say I wish people sometime were like computers. They could just plug in the USB and just download. And it doesn't work like that. It's just the ones that are pliable, that are like, you know what? I'll go through the journey. And I don't care how hard it is. I'm gonna get back up, come back for more. Because ultimately I know that I'm gonna continue to grow. There are folks that I talk to from time to time. And sometimes you actually do better than your mentors do. And I still have conversations with them. Like, oh, I'm so proud of you. You've done this, you've done that. But they help me to not be Icarus. So if you know the story of Icarus and flying too close to the sun, they help you to keep your head from getting too big, right? Getting caught up in your own hubris. It's important. So I definitely encourage you to do that. So my challenge for you this Saturday is to add with everyone else, well, with the other ones, right? Meeting 5 people a month, cultivating, increasing your circle of influence, increasing and cultivating your circle of support. If you have a mentor, reach out to your mentor. Send them a text, send them an email, give them a call. Let them know how you're doing. If you don't, start thinking about a mentor. Tell you what, the most successful people, however you measure success, but in this society, in this capitalistic society, successful people have mentors. When I was consulting for the Navy earlier this year and the end of last year, it's one of the things that we actually taught. It was part of our curriculum. For folks that were separating from the military, to get a mentor, more than one, to help them with their transition, to help them in their career path. These tools are out there for folks to make their lives easier, for them to be successful. Unfortunately, too many in our community don't value those tools. We haven't been taught that those things are important. We've been in an era of you can't tell me nothing, or I'm going to keep it 100. And so while you're keeping it 100, that probably means that you're not listening, you're not hearing. Because you're more focused on making sure that you tell them what you think. Surprisingly enough, the road to change is going to be a steep hill. But if you have the right tool, if you have the right vehicle, that hill doesn't have to feel as steep as it is. You're walking up a tall hill. We can all reflect back on that. You're going, you're walking, you see the top, legs is burning a little bit. Like, man, when am I going to get there? Or you're riding a bicycle. It might be easier. When we were younger, we started weaving back and forth in the S because we thought that would make it easier to get up the hill, right? Or you're in a car. And the car has to work hard, but you're not working hard. It's about the tool. We just need to start using the tools that exist, respecting the tools, using the tools, applying what we learn, engaging in it. You want to learn how to swim? You don't watch YouTube videos. You get in the water. In our society right now, we spend so much time watching videos or listening or just saying, you know what? I'm going to just figure it out on my own. I'll make my own mistakes and I'll get there when I get there. But the only way to become an effective swimmer is to actually get in the water and swim. Now, you can watch videos to help you with your technique, to show you different types of styles. But ultimately, you're going to have to get in that water and you're going to have to do it. And a lot of us want to become proficient in the thing without actually getting in the water. And if we do get in the water, well, we want to stay in the shallow end. Because that 8 feet, that 12 feet, that's so far over my head. What in your life is keeping you from getting in the pool? From only watching videos, listening to people, going to meetings, sitting in groups, trying to figure it out on your own. That's why they have things like battle tested, right? That phrase. Trial by fire, because you went through it. Products have to go through quality tests for durability, for sustainability, for freshness, for taste, whatever it is, right? We too have to go through our own quality assurance. We too have to go through that trial by fire. We too have to be battle tested, which means that we have to be in it. We got to get in the pool. And if we're not good at it, because To some folks, it comes naturally. They just jump in and they're a natural fish. Off they go. People are good at everything. They just jump in. They've never done it before, and they're just swimming. They got the dog paddle, the backstroke. They're just jumping off into the deep end. They're not afraid. And here you are, you're in, and you just sink like a rock, and you can't understand it. That's like, man, I've been coming to the pool every day for 2 weeks. This person looks like he's, she's getting ready to practice for the Olympic trials. I'm barely dog paddling back and forth. I'm still trying to figure out how to float on my back without sinking. I'm trying to tread water. Yes, it's going to be easier for some. Some things you do are going to take longer. You're going to fall off the horse a lot. It's one thing that is so awesome about kids. Kids are so resilient, right? They get back up, they get back up, they get back up, they get back up, they get back up. Adults, we fall. First off, we already don't want to fall, right? Like, whoo, yeah, I fell last month. I fell last year. That I don't feel good. So I'm gonna go ahead and try this thing, but I don't want to fall. So I'm gonna be real careful. And then when and if they do fall, and typically they're gonna fall on their journey. It's like, Lord, that hurt. We don't want to do that no more. I don't even know if I want to do this. Do I even really want this? Is this really even my goal? Is this really my dream? You know what? I think this was someone else's dream. Somebody else wanted this for me. You know what? I can live with where I'm at right now. If I really think about it, it's really not that bad. I mean, I got this and I got that and I got that. Sure, I want these things, but maybe I'm tripping because you know what? Other people have it worse than I do. So maybe this is good. That'll keep me from falling again. And I know what this is. Even though this isn't really what makes me happy, I know this is safe. I'm not really content, but I'll just have to deal with when it's bad. But I know what to expect because the falls when I try to climb, I don't know. I might fall and hit my knee. I might fall backwards and hit the back of my head. I might twist my ankle. People might be watching me. And if people watch me when I fall, whoo, man, that one is even worse than being physically hurt because when they see me fall, I'm so embarrassed. And many people are watching and they're waiting for me to fall because when I try to do better, right, they feel some kind of way about it. That crab in the barrel mentality that we use a lot, right? Oh, you trying to get up out the barrel, huh? Oh, so you better, huh? You just like us. Why would you even try to do that? I feel some kind of way about that now. So yeah, all right, crab, go ahead. Try to get your ass up out that barrel. We'll watch. We'll even pull on you and try to pull you back down. We're going to tease you and ridicule you. And every time you fall back down, we'll say, see, this is where you belong. See, I knew you couldn't do it. Now, did you learn your lesson? Now come down here and be with the rest of us crabs because this is where crabs live. This is what we do, right? That's what I was saying about that myopic viewpoint. Not seeing outside of the county. And the county is even pretty large as a statement. Not seeing outside the county. Not seeing outside the city. Not seeing outside the state. Not seeing outside the country. Both physically and metaphorically. I fell a lot when I decided to grow. I was just telling this story yesterday. When life wasn't working out for me and I needed to call home. And my dad told me to put my pride on the shelf, and I was so angry with him for that because he knew what I needed. But he wanted me to ask. He wasn't going to give it to me. He wasn't going to make it easy for me. He wasn't going to sugarcoat it for me. And I'm so thankful for him because that's what I needed. He knew that I wasn't going to stick to it if it was continuously sugarcoated, made easy, if he made the path smooth for me. If I didn't go through the uncomfortable things that I didn't want to go through. See, oftentimes we'll go through pain that we want to go through, but we won't go through the pain that we need to go through to get to a space where we're going to be where we want to be. But he knew that as an educator, as a father. So he didn't make it easy. And I could have failed right then and there, but I wouldn't have failed him. I would have failed myself. And I would have been unaccountable and said, well, I didn't do it because he didn't want to help me. We're so good at blame shifting. He didn't want to do it my way, the way that I needed. My dad was uncompromising in that because he knew the pathway forward. He knew how I would get success that would be lasting. Thank you, Rob. Rob says it's always hard to get up and get going, keep going. He knew. But man, I wanted him to sugarcoat it for me. I wanted him just to say, son, I'll make it all better. I already know what you need. So come on, here you go. This. But if he does that for me, if he did that for me, then when trouble came, and trouble gonna come, I would not be resilient enough to navigate through it. When trouble comes, I'd fall down. You see a boxer take a hit and fall down. Sometimes he falls down before he even gets the hit. We do that a lot in our life. We see the punch coming. We know it's coming. We know the fall's going to come. We just fall on the ground, right? We don't even want to take the hit. Oh, don't worry. I'll just lay myself down. You ain't got to hit me with that. You know, when I taught at the college, students would come in and they made the decision to grow, to change their life. They knew they were giving up their jobs, their opportunity cost to make money so that they can, in a lot of ways, it felt like they were going backwards, right? I'm going to go to school. I'm going to not make money right now. I'm going to be a starving student. Maybe I do student employment or whatever, but I'm going to make a fraction of what I made before. And I might even amass some student loan debt. But they made it up in their mind that they were going to change their life. So now they're on this journey. They get through. Sometimes they get through the first quarter. Maybe they get through the second quarter. But here comes Christmas. Here comes the birthday. Here comes the holiday. Your friends are going to go to Vegas. Your favorite artist is coming into town. You need some money. You're tired of being on the bus. You need some money. Other people seem to be doing better because they're making money. Ooh, man, I just got these rims on my car. We just got back from Vegas. Hot girl summer. You couldn't go. And they'll come into advising and say, I need to work. I'm going to have to put school on hold. There was a time that I actually did a math equation on the board, and I talked about how, this is how much you're making now. Back then, let's say it was $12 an hour, right? You make $12 an hour, you're working 20 to 40 hours a week, let's say. And the jobs that they typically had were jobs, not careers. So you can multiply that by 2,000, make the numbers pretty easy, right? Work about 2,000 hours a year. And so for a 2-year degree, you're going to work about 4,000 hours at $12 an hour. That's your opportunity cost. In year 3 and year 4, you're going to continue to make that. But if you give up that money now to get your education, you're going to come in at a higher wage. And eventually, that educated person will catch up that person that was making that $12 an hour with maybe that quarter raise every 2 years or however often till they hit that cap. And then that person's going to blow them out. And they will never, ever catch. Now there's retirement. Now maybe your kids don't have to amass as many student loans as you did. Maybe you're a home buyer. You take vacations. You see that person in concert. In Florida, not in Washington. And the most tragic thing is I would see them take the job and leave. I advise you decide. And 2 years later, they're ready to try again. And they come in. I know, Mr. Cameron. Help me get started again. I'm ready. And they lost 2 years. And the folks that were with them that started that same quarter that are now in year 3, quarter 2, going into their bachelor program. Because some will leave maybe after their first year and they come back 2 years later and they're in a bachelor program at OC. So that person, they both started in the exact same class, sitting next to each other. Student A is a junior in their bachelor program. Student B is starting back over and has lost the English and math skills because they never did make it to college level English or math in the first place. So now they replace taking the acuplacer and have to redo it again. And when they take an account of their life over the last 2 years and the aggregate of what they've done, those experiences, that opportunity cost of leaving school and having the experiences and making that money, and never, ever compared. What's even further alarming is I taught about grants and scholarships, even had a class on it. $500 scholarship. Take you an hour to write. No, you're not guaranteed to get it, but if you do, well, it's $500. Took you an hour. What job have you ever done where you made $100 an hour? But out here, I don't have time for that. That's not guaranteed. I need something guaranteed. So you need a guaranteed $12 an hour that you're going to work 8 hours for. Well, you're going to work more than 8 because you're only going to make 96 at 12, right? Got to pay taxes out of that. So really, you're probably going to work more like 10 hours to make that 100. Or you could work 1. And many grants and scholarships have a lot of the same language. So you're going to be able to use that. It's not going to take an hour to do every single one. And I'd watch the students that would listen and apply for the grants and scholarships. 2,000, 3,600. I got 5 grants. And I have financial aid. Because, at the associate level, You really shouldn't have any student loans if you qualify for FAFSA, right? And so then when we do the math and we say, okay, what is 12 times 2,000 hours? $24,000. You multiply that by 0.8. You get about 19,000, right? You've worked a whole year full time at $12 an hour at a job at a McDonald's or something that's dead end, a clerk, front desk worker, no benefits, no medical. But the scholarships that this person got because they invested a week of work toward that, it paid for almost half of what this person had to work an entire year for. On top of the fact that they're getting FAFSA money that they don't pay back. But I need the money now. FOMO, the fear of missing out. I've got to have those experiences now. I can't put it off for me or mine. Instant gratification. We were talking about that with the Okoye and I were talking about that last Sunday during our 5-hour conversation. I was talking about how Layla and I love to play video games where they give you the little ticket. And she used to like to spend the money immediately off of it. We got 200 points. All right. Oh, give me all the candy and this and that and just spend it all. And then she doesn't have anything. So I started making her save. Nope, you can't spend all the tickets. Boy, she was unhappy about that. You're going to save. You can get a piece of candy or two. But you're going to save most of this. About 80% of these points you're going to save. Because you're looking up and you're like, ooh, I want that. Well, that's 8,000 tickets. You got 200. It's going to be a minute. I love teachable moments. I like finding the lessons in all things. So soon she learned. She'll try you because that's what kids are going to do, right? The next time we go, oh, yeah, I want to spend all this money. Nope. But then all of a sudden, she started asking. Matter of fact, she just got back from Alabama a little while ago. One of the first things she asked was, how many points do we have? We have 2,700 and something points right now. So I said, oh, we have like 250 points. Really? So all of a sudden, it's like, well, before we come, we play, have some fun. I'd buy a couple pieces of candy that's gone before we make it back to the car. But now you're saying I've got 250 points. I could get all the stuff on this row now, and I'm close to the stuff on this row. And that stuff is what I really want. Now she's pumped. Now she's excited. Delayed gratification. Learning how to save. Getting joy out of that. So now she likes to see. She wants to see, what do we have saved? She could go right now and just buy something out of the arcade without even playing a game because she's saved. So now she's having fun on both ends. She has fun when we go and we play. She has fun saving the points. And she has fun knowing that if I want it, I can have it. But you know what? It would be cool, but I don't really need it. I don't really want it. I'll wait till there's a time when I really want it. You know how powerful that is as a lesson, as a habit? I don't even have that well. She's got it better than I do. That is tremendous skill to have. Delayed gratification. What are you willing to put off now to get to where you really want to go? And it's not enough to just get there. What are you willing to do so that you can stay where you want to be? See, my team knows that I get really frustrated with potential opportunities because they're right there. They're right in your grasp, but they can be taken away because anything can fall through. And even if something does come through and it's good and you got it, I still have to be looking at what's next. How do we maintain? How do we grow outside of what we have now? And it's not a thing of, well, it just sounds like you're never happy and you're never satisfied. No, just the opposite, actually. Tremendously proud of our accomplishments, the things that we've been able to achieve, both as a team and individually, in our own personal and professional growth and development. But I also know that it needs to endure, it needs to sustain. I won't lie, I don't feel great today. I can barely walk. But we need to endure. There are people that count on me, count on my team in lots of different ways. I love to just lay on the bed and sleep through recovery. But it's just not how life works. But through practice, you can do the hard things. You got to get in the pool. You got to stay in the pool. And if it doesn't come natural to you, you're going to spend a lot of time in the pool. The trick is find some aspects of the pool that you actually like, that help you to stay in the pool so that you can get to where you want to get. My pool right now is working with folks that don't work well with each other. They see demons at every turn, and sometimes they're the demon. We've got gatekeepers that keep us from making progress as we try to dismantle these institutions, these systemic institutions that continue to oppress. But we're not going to make it if we can't find out how to work together. And we can be very empathetic and sympathetic to our own plight. I went through this. I had this experience. Okay. So who's going to change it? The government? Someone else in the community? Maybe. It's going to take you. And as I go back to the conversation from the history education panel earlier, they all said really good, powerful things. But there was a lot of focus on things outside of what's happening right here in Kitsap County. The things that people are doing here. Not down south, not at the National Museum in DC. Here. These things are here. We need to support the people here. We need to work together here. If we can't do it here, and we try to go out and do it other places, real hard to catch true momentum and have that staying power. Because when it gets dark, when people attack, when you stand alone, you tend to fall quicker. It's really easy to snap a toothpick. But when you hold 200 toothpicks together and you try to snap it, it's almost impossible. We have got to find ways to work together. And either remove those that hold the gate to ensure that others of us don't come in, that risk their power, their self-importance, their tokenism, their bag, or we find ways to pull them back into our side. But we need to hold them accountable. And as Tracy Flood was saying, we do need to get involved. Everyone is saying that right now. We must get involved. Stand together or perish alone. Both in reality and out. Shout out to the G2 team. They are on their way to a Sounders game. Stay safe, team. See, the work goes on. The work we want to do. But the work that we don't want to do oftentimes is just as important, if not more important, than the work that it is that we want to do. Oftentimes we'll say to people, hey, I don't mind coming to help you, but I want to help you do what I want to do. And a lot of times that's not what they need you to do. I would love for you to be able to come and help me with what you want to help me with. But I need you to help me in this way. I challenge you today to help someone in the way they need it. To help an organization in the way that they need it. And not in the way that you want to. Growth, professional and personal development. I always love spending time with you. As Okoye said, Monday, 6 p.m. That is our big podcast on emergency preparedness. Again, send your questions in all the different ways that you can. I am going to rest for a little bit now. I am Marwan Cameron. This is the Conduit. Thank you for spending your Saturday